You think African American family reunions in the 1960s only featured the usual fried chicken and potato salad? Think again. These sprawling gatherings brought out ingenious and deeply meaningful dishes. Let's dig into 30 cheap dishes that kept families fed, connected, and celebrating. Neck bones and rice anchored family reunion tables with rich, soul satisfying presents that cost almost nothing to prepare. Women bought these bony cuts for pennies, knowing that hours of slow simmering would transform them into tender meat swimming in silky gravy. The bones released their marrow into the cooking liquid, creating a broth so rich it seemed impossible from such humble beginnings. Seasoned with onion, garlic, bay leaves, and black pepper, the pot bubbled away while cousins played and elders swapped stories. Served over mounds of fluffy white rice, each plate stretched the budget while filling bellies completely. The rice absorbed every drop of flavorful liquid, turning simple grains into something extraordinary. Neck bones and rice proved that the cheapest cuts, handled with patience, could become the most anticipated dish. Watermelon rind pickles were a testament to the waste-nothing philosophy that defined African American cooking. After the sweet red flesh was eaten during hot reunion afternoons, the white and green rinds were saved and transformed into sweet, tangy pickles. Women soaked the rinds overnight in salt water to firm them, then simmered them in a syrup of vinegar, sugar, cinnamon, and cloves until translucent. The process took patience but cost nothing, since the rinds were kitchen scraps given new life. These pickles provided welcome contrast to heavy reunion foods, their sweet acidity cutting through plates of meat and gravy. Children often wrinkled their noses at first, but grew to love the unexpected sweetness hiding in those pale slices. Watermelon rind pickles represented the genius of turning would-be garbage into treasured food. Pig feet were among the most economical cuts at any butcher shop, and African American cooks transformed them into silky delicacies that drew lines at reunion tables. The feet were scrubbed clean and simmered for hours with vinegar, bay leaves, onions, and hot peppers until the meat fell from the bones. Some families served them hot from the pot with white rice to soak up that rich, unctuous broth. Others pickled them in spiced vinegar, serving them cold as a tangy appetizer that older relatives treasured. The collagen created a texture unlike any other meat, sticky, tender, and deeply satisfying to those who grew up eating them. Children sometimes hesitated at their appearance, but elders ate them proudly, passing down appreciation for these humble cuts. Pig feet proved that the parts others discarded became celebration food. Butter beans and ham hocks represented the marriage of garden vegetables and meat counter scraps that defined reunion cooking. Large pots of pale green lima beans simmered all morning with smoked ham hocks, the bones releasing their smoky essence into the creamy legumes. Women started the pot before sunrise, letting the beans slowly break down until some dissolved into the broth while others held their shape. The ham hocks yielded precious scraps of tender meat shredded back into the pot before serving. Children loved scooping the soft beans onto their plates, mashing them into the silky liquid. One ham hock costing mere pennies could flavor an entire pot feeding 30 people. Butter beans and ham hocks carried memories of grandmothers stirring pots and aunties tasting for seasoning, showing abundance came from patience. Skillet cornbread arrived at family reunions still warm from cast iron, its golden crust crackling as it was cut into thick wedges. Families made cornbread from stone-ground cornmeal mixed with buttermilk, eggs, and bacon grease that gave each bite its richness. The batter was poured into skillets preheated with fat, creating that signature crispy bottom everyone fought over. Some families preferred cornbread, slightly sweet, while others insisted on savory versions that paired better with beans and greens. The cornbread served multiple purposes. It was bread, side dish, and utensil for sopping up potlikker from collard greens. Children grabbed squares to eat while running through yards, leaving crumb trails behind. Cornbread cost almost nothing to make, yet grounded the entire meal. No reunion table was complete without several skillets. Pickled beets brought vibrant color to reunion tables, their deep magenta hue staining everything they touched while delivering sweet and tangy flavor. Women canned them by the dozen in summer when beets were cheap, creating jewel-toned jars that lasted until reunion season. The beets were boiled tender, sliced thin, and packed into jars with hot vinegar brine, sweetened with sugar and spiced with cloves. Served cold alongside heavy meat dishes, they provided refreshing contrast that cleansed the palate between bites. Children learned early to be careful around the beet table, though purple-stained fingers became badges of reunion participation. The pickling process transformed affordable root vegetables into something elegant. Pickled beets represented forward-thinking preservation, summer's bounty captured in glass to brighten gatherings. Candied yams were among the most anticipated dishes at any African-American family reunion, their caramelized sweetness drawing people back for second helpings. Women peeled and sliced the orange flesh, layering it in baking dishes with brown sugar, butter, cinnamon, and nutmeg before baking until syrup bubbled. Some families added orange juice for brightness, while others topped theirs with marshmallows that turned golden under heat. Sweet potatoes were among the cheapest vegetables available, yet this preparation transformed them into something tasting like dessert. Children especially loved them, requesting yams above all other dishes on the reunion table. The scent of cinnamon and butter from the kitchen signaled that serious cooking was underway. Candied yams proved that celebration food didn't require expensive ingredients. Macaroni salad appeared in giant bowls at family reunions, its creamy coolness providing relief from summer heat and rich barbecued meats. Women boiled pounds of elbow macaroni, then folded it with mayonnaise, mustard, diced celery, onion, and hard-boiled eggs until every noodle was coated. Some families added sweet pickle relish, while others preferred chopped bell peppers for color and crunch. The salad had to rest overnight, allowing flavors to meld and noodles to absorb the creamy coating. Children piled it onto their plates alongside barbecue, appreciating its mild flavor compared to spicier dishes. A few boxes of pasta and pantry condiments could feed an entire reunion crowd economically. Macaroni salad represented the genius of stretching affordable ingredients into crowd-pleasing abundance. Fried okra arrived at reunion tables in heaping mounds, each pod transformed from slimy vegetable into crispy golden nuggets that disappeared fast. Women sliced fresh okra into rounds, dredged them in seasoned cornmeal, and fried them in cast iron skillets filled with hot oil. The cornmeal coating turned crunchy, while the okra inside became tender without the texture issues that made some people avoid it. Children who claimed to hate okra would devour the fried version, often not realizing what they were eating. The dish stretched garden abundance into celebration food. One bushel could feed dozens when transformed this way. Served hot with plenty of salt, fried okra disappeared almost as fast as it hit the table. Fried okra represented Southern ingenuity at its finest, turning humble vegetables into irresistible bites everyone loved. Red velvet cake was the crown jewel of dessert tables at African-American family reunions, its dramatic crimson layers revealed with each slice. Women mixed cocoa, buttermilk, vinegar, and red food coloring into tender batter, then baked it into layers stacked high with tangy cream cheese frosting. The cake's origin was disputed, but its place in Black Southern tradition was undeniable. No reunion was complete without one. The cream cheese frosting provided perfect contrast to the subtle chocolate flavor, while the color made every slice feel like celebration. Grandmothers guarded their recipes carefully, each claiming theirs was the original. Children stared at the towering cakes, knowing they'd wait until after the main meal for their pieces. Red velvet cake represented the understanding that celebration required beauty as well as taste. Deviled eggs appeared on every reunion table, their golden yellow filling piped neatly into white halves that disappeared within minutes. Women boiled dozens of eggs the night before, carefully peeling and slicing each one to remove the yolk for mashing. The filling combined yolks with mayonnaise, mustard, pickle juice, and paprika until smooth and tangy. Each half was topped with a sprinkle of paprika for color. Eggs cost almost nothing, yet these transformed versions looked elegant on serving platters lined with lettuce leaves. Children circled the table waiting for permission to grab one, while adults debated whose recipe was superior. Deviled eggs represented the art of making something fancy from humble ingredients. They traveled well and could be made days ahead without losing quality. Potato salad was as essential to reunions as the relatives themselves, with every matriarch claiming her version was definitive. Women boiled pounds of potatoes until just tender, then diced them while still warm so they absorbed the dressing better. The mixture combined mayonnaise, mustard, chopped celery, onion, and hard-boiled eggs with sweet pickle relish, adding brightness. The salad had to rest overnight, allowing flavors to marry into something greater than its parts. Served cold in massive bowls, it provided cool relief alongside smoky barbecued meats. Potatoes were dirt cheap, stretching to feed dozens from just a few pounds. Potato salad proved that simple ingredients handled with care created dishes people requested by name for years. Collard greens simmered in massive pots at every African American family reunion, their earthy aroma announcing serious cooking was happening. Women washed the leaves repeatedly to remove grit, then stripped them from tough stems and sliced them into ribbons. The greens cooked for hours with smoked ham hocks or turkey necks, absorbing smoky flavor while becoming silky tender. Vinegar, hot sauce, and sugar balanced the natural bitterness into something complex. The cooking liquid, Potlikker, was treasured as much as the greens, sopped up with cornbread by those who knew. Collards were cheap and abundant, especially from backyard gardens. Elders believed the greens brought good fortune when eaten at gatherings. Collard greens represented the wisdom of slow cooking, transforming tough leaves into tender celebration food. Black-eyed peas held special significance at African American gatherings, carrying traditions of luck and prosperity from generations past. Women soaked dried peas overnight, then simmered them slowly with ham hocks, onions, garlic, and bay leaves until creamy. The peas absorbed smoky pork flavor while releasing starch to thicken the cooking liquid into silky gravy. Some families added tomatoes or hot peppers for depth, while others kept seasonings simple. Served over rice or alongside cornbread, black-eyed peas stretched to feed entire families for almost nothing. Children learned that eating them brought blessings, making even reluctant young eaters clean their plates. The peas connected reunion tables to African and Southern traditions surviving through centuries. Black-eyed peas proved meaningful foods came from affordable ingredients. Pound cake arrived at reunions wrapped in foil or displayed on glass stands, its dense golden crumb promising rich satisfaction. The traditional recipe called for a pound each of butter, sugar, eggs, and flour. Simple ingredients transformed through patient creaming and careful baking. Women beat the batter until light and fluffy, then poured it into greased tube pans to bake low and slow. The result was dense yet tender, with fine crumb tasting of pure butter and vanilla. Pound cake needed no frosting, though some served it with fresh berries or powdered sugar. It kept well for days and improved as flavors mellowed. Slices appeared at breakfast, lunch, and midnight snacks throughout reunion weekends. Pound cake represented mastery of basics, proving technique mattered more than expensive ingredients. Peach cobbler bubbled in cast iron skillets at reunions, its golden crust giving way to spiced fruit tasting like summer captured in a dish. Women sliced fresh peaches when in season or used canned ones year-round, layering them with sugar, cinnamon, and nutmeg. The topping varied. Some spooned biscuit dough over fruit, while others poured batter underneath and let it rise around peaches. As it baked, the kitchen filled with intoxicating sweetness, drawing everyone closer. Served warm with vanilla ice cream melting into the juices, peach cobbler ended meals on notes of pure contentment. Peaches were cheap and abundant during summer, making this dessert economical in large quantities. Elders passed down specific ratios as treasured family secrets. Peach cobbler proved that honest ingredients needed nothing fancy. Chitlins appeared at reunions for adventurous eaters, their distinctive aroma announcing their presence long before hitting the table. Women spent hours cleaning pig intestines, scrubbing and rinsing them repeatedly until ready for cooking. The chitlins simmered with onions, vinegar, bay leaves, and hot peppers until tender enough to cut with a fork. Some families fried them crispy after boiling, while others served them soft in cooking liquid. The flavor was intense and unmistakable, earthy, rich, and tied to traditions of using every part of the animal. Children often avoided them, but elders ate them proudly as connection to heritage. Chitlins cost almost nothing since they were parts others discarded, yet required skill and patience to prepare properly. This dish represented transformation of necessity into cherished tradition. Hog maw separated reunion guests into those who grew up eating it and those who couldn't get past its origins. The pig stomach was cleaned thoroughly, stuffed with seasoned sausage, potatoes, and cabbage, then roasted until everything melded into savory richness. Women prepared it the day before, letting it cool so flavors set before slicing into thick rounds. The texture was chewy and satisfying, the filling spilling out in aromatic layers, mixing on the plate. Some families simmered hog maw in broth instead of roasting, creating heartier, stew-like dishes. Either way, it stretched expensive sausage with cheap vegetables into meals feeding many. Elders who remembered lean times appreciated every bite for what it represented. Hog maw proved resourcefulness, created dishes worth passing down. Bread pudding turned stale loaves into dessert, rivaling any fancy bakery creation at family reunions. Women tore day-old bread into chunks, soaking them in sweetened milk and eggs, seasoned with vanilla, cinnamon, and nutmeg. Raisins were folded through before baking until golden and slightly puffed, the edges caramelizing against the pan. The center stayed custardy, while the top formed a delicate crust, crackling with each spoonful. Some families drizzled bourbon sauce over warm slices, while others preferred it plain. Bread pudding represented the genius of waste-nothing cooking, transforming would-be garbage into something people requested specifically. It could be made in massive batches economically using bread that cost nothing. This dessert taught every generation that creativity mattered more than cost. Sweet tea flowed endlessly at African American family reunions, its amber liquid served in tall glasses clinking with ice. Women brewed massive batches by steeping tea bags in boiling water, then stirring in sugar while still hot so it dissolved completely. The sweetness level varied by family. Some made it almost syrupy, while others preferred lighter sweetness, letting the tea shine. Gallons waited in refrigerators and coolers, refilled constantly as relatives came back for more. Sweet tea cost almost nothing to make, yet provided refreshment no store-bought drink could match. Children ran back to the drink table between games, gulping it down before racing off again. Adults sipped slowly on shaded porches, glasses sweating in summer heat. Sweet tea was more than beverage. It was the liquid thread connecting every reunion memory. Banana pudding was the dessert causing arguments at reunions, not over who made the best, but who got the last serving. Women layered vanilla wafers with sliced bananas and homemade custard, building towers of sweetness that chilled overnight. The custard was cooked slowly on the stovetop, whisked constantly until it thickened into silky richness. Some families topped theirs with meringue, browned in the oven, while others preferred clouds of whipped cream. The wafers softened as they absorbed custard, creating textures that melted together on the tongue. Bananas were cheap, and the other ingredients came from any pantry, yet the result tasted like pure indulgence. Children scraped bowls, clean, their faces smeared with pudding. Banana pudding proved that patience created desserts worth fighting over. Fried corn appeared in cast iron skillets at reunions, its kernels glistening with butter and slightly caramelized from the heat. Women cut fresh corn from the cob, scraping the milk from each ear to add creaminess. The kernels were fried slowly in bacon drippings with onions until golden and slightly crisp at the edges. Salt, pepper, and sometimes a pinch of sugar brought out the corn's natural sweetness. The dish was simple but transformative, raw corn becoming rich and satisfying through patient cooking. Children who wouldn't eat corn any other way devoured fried corn by the spoonful. It stretched summer's abundance into celebration, food costing almost nothing. Fried corn represented the alchemy of Southern cooking, turning garden vegetables into something extraordinary. Cracklin bread arrived at reunion tables studded with crispy pork skin that added richness to every bite. Women saved cracklings from hog butchering, those rendered bits of skin and fat that became crunchy treasures. The cracklings were folded into cornbread batter before baking, distributing pockets of porky crunch throughout the golden bread. Each slice offered different textures, soft cornbread giving way to crispy, salty cracklings that melted on the tongue. The bread was richer than plain cornbread, more substantial and satisfying for those doing hard work. Nothing from the hog was wasted, and crackling bread proved that scraps could become the most requested dish. Children often picked out the cracklings first, leaving holes in their slices. This bread represented the wisdom of using every part of what you had. Stewed tomatoes simmered in pots at reunions, their bright red color and tangy sweetness brightening plates filled with heavier dishes. Women used fresh tomatoes from summer gardens or canned ones put up the previous year, cooking them slowly with onions, sugar, and bread cubes. The bread absorbed the tomato juices and broke down into the mixture, thickening it into something between sauce and stew. Some families added butter for richness, while others kept the dish lighter. Stewed tomatoes provided welcome acidity that cut through fatty meats and creamy sides. They cost almost nothing when tomatoes were in season and gardens overflowed with fruit. Children often resisted them at first, but the sweetness won most over eventually. Stewed tomatoes represented the tradition of preserving summer's abundance to brighten winter tables. Pigs in blankets were the finger food children grabbed between games, their portable size perfect for reunion chaos. Women wrapped small sausages in biscuit dough, then baked them until golden and puffy. The dough crisped on the outside while staying soft against the sausage, creating contrast in each bite. Some families use hot dogs cut into pieces, while others use breakfast sausages for better flavor. The dish was cheap to make in large batches and could be served warm or at room temperature. Children ate them one-handed while running through yards, returning for more whenever they passed the table. Adults appreciated their simplicity and the way they satisfied without being heavy. Pigs in blankets proved that reunion food needed to work for all ages and eating styles easily. Green bean casserole appeared in baking dishes at reunions, its creamy filling topped with crispy fried onions that everyone fought over. Women combined canned green beans with cream of mushroom soup, creating a simple mixture that baked into comfort food perfection. The fried onion topping added crunch and savory depth that elevated the humble ingredients beneath. Some families made the beans from scratch, while others relied entirely on canned goods for convenience. Either way, the casserole disappeared quickly from buffet tables. Children often picked off the crispy onion topping first, leaving bare spots in the dish. The casserole represented 1960s convenience cooking at its finest. Simple ingredients transformed into something people genuinely craved. It could be assembled ahead and baked when needed. Hoppin' John carried deep significance at African American gatherings. Its combination of rice and black-eyed peas representing luck and prosperity. Women cooked the peas with ham hocks until tender, then folded them with rice so each grain absorbed the smoky liquid. The dish was seasoned with onion, garlic, and pepper, letting natural flavors shine through. Some families added tomatoes or hot peppers, while others kept traditional preparations unchanged through generations. Hoppin' John stretched cheap ingredients into hearty portions, satisfying hard-working appetites. Elders taught children that eating it brought blessings for the coming year. The dish connected reunion tables to African and Gula traditions preserved through centuries. Hoppin' John proved that the most meaningful foods often came from the humblest beginnings. Fried pies were the handheld treats that appeared wrapped in paper towels at reunion dessert tables. Women rolled out biscuit dough into circles, filled them with sweetened fruit, then folded and crimped the edges before frying until golden. Apple and peach were the most common fillings, made from fresh fruit or preserves put up earlier in the season. The dough puffed and crisped in hot oil while the filling bubbled inside, creating pockets of fruity sweetness. Children grabbed them still warm, biting through crispy crust to reach the soft fruit within. Fried pies traveled well and could be eaten without plates or forks. They cost almost nothing to make when fruit was abundant and could be prepared in large batches. Fried pies represented the portable nature of reunion eating, where people move between conversations and activities. Chow appeared in small dishes at reunion tables, its tangy sweet relish adding brightness to plates of heavy meat and starches. Women made it from end-of-season vegetables, green tomatoes, cabbage, onions, and peppers, chopped fine and pickled in spiced vinegar. The relish was put up in jars during fall when gardens produced more than families could eat fresh. Its complex flavor combined sweet, sour, and spicy notes that cut through rich foods and awakened tired palates. Children usually avoided it, but adults spooned it generously over beans, greens, and barbecue. Chow represented the tradition of preserving abundance for leaner times. It transformed would-be garden waste into a condiment people requested by name. The relish connected reunion tables to generations of women who refused to let anything go to waste.
In the 1960s, fatback and cabbage was a reminder that flavor did not come from abundance, but from knowing how to cook with care. It was a dish that taught respect for every part of the animal and every leaf from the garden. Pork, fatback, and cabbage turned scraps into sustenance. Vegetable pot pie with biscuit crust was one of the cleverest ways to turn leftovers into a comforting meal. My grandmother gathered whatever vegetables were left from the week, beans, carrots, peas, or turnips, and simmered them in a simple gravy. She poured the mixture into a dish and covered it with biscuit dough instead of pie crust, which baked into a golden, fluffy topping. The result was hearty, filling, and deeply satisfying, stretching scraps into something that felt like a Sunday supper. Each slice carried both thrift and comfort, a reminder that nothing from the kitchen was wasted. The biscuit crust gave the dish substance, making it a true dinner instead of just a side. In the 1960s, vegetable pot pie with biscuit crust was common across homes that relied on ingenuity, turning odds and ends into meals that filled plates and warmed hearts. It was survival, wrapped in comfort. Food that told the story of resourceful families making the most of what they had. Homemade chow relish added brightness and crunch to plates crowded with greens, beans, and smoked meats. Cabbage, onions, peppers, and green tomatoes were chopped fine and simmered with vinegar, mustard seed, and sugar until they formed a tangy condiment that could last through winter. Every household had a slightly different recipe, some sweeter, some hotter, each a reflection of the cook's own hand. The relish brought sharp contrast to rich dishes like pork shoulder or pinto beans, cutting through heaviness with a lively bite. In late summer, neighbors gathered to chop vegetables together, sharing stories as big pots bubbled on outdoor fires. Jars lined pantry shelves in rows of glowing gold and green, a promise of flavor when fresh produce was long gone. Over time, store-bought pickles and bottled sauces replaced the careful preparation of chow, but its memory endures wherever families recall the sound of knives on wooden boards and the reward of a bright spoonful alongside a hearty meal. Wild rice pudding combined indigenous grains with African-inspired preparation to create a dish both nourishing and subtly sweet. Wild rice grew naturally in shallow lakes and slow rivers, and enslaved families near these wetlands harvested the dark grains with paddles and baskets, drying them in the sun for year-round use. Cooked slowly in water until tender, the rice was stirred with a bit of sorghum syrup or honey if available, making a warm pudding that supplied protein and lasting energy. Its nutty flavor and satisfying texture turned a simple bowl into a special treat, especially when fresh fruit or spices could be added. This recipe carried forward after emancipation as African-American cooks continued to value wild rice for festive meals and family gatherings. Modern chefs still celebrate its earthy richness, but the story behind wild rice pudding honors the blend of native and African foodways that sustained people through scarcity and created a dessert that is at once humble and deeply rooted in the shared history of America's wetlands and kitchens. Homemade cracklins were a prized treat made from pork skins, fried until golden and crisp. Families would render down hog fat and save the skins, cutting them into pieces that crackled in hot lard as they cooked. The result was crunchy, salty, and deeply flavorful, often eaten with cornbread or sprinkled over greens. Nothing went to waste, and cracklins were proof of how families found ways to enjoy even the humblest scraps. They carried a strong connection to hog butchering days, when entire communities gathered to process a hog and share every part of it. Cracklins added texture and flavor to otherwise plain meals, and for many, they were a reminder of both thrift and celebration. Though inexpensive, they carried a sense of richness and taste that lifted spirits. Homemade cracklins showed how food could be both practical and deeply satisfying, even in the hardest of times. Chicken wing stew was one of those meals that would surprise modern ears, since wings were once the cheapest part of the bird. My grandmother bought them in bulk when she could, piling them into pots with onions, celery, and carrots. Slowly simmered, the wings gave up their fat and flavor, turning thin broth into rich gravy. She thickened it with flour or cornstarch, serving it hot over rice or bread to stretch it even further. It was messy eating, but no one complained because the taste was so comforting. Wings may be prized today, but in the 1960s they were scraps, turned into nourishment by clever hands. She said every part of the bird had value if you treated it with respect. Chicken wing stew carried the spirit of thrift, transforming what others dismissed into something that filled the house with warmth. It was proof that good cooking did not depend on wealth, only patience and care. Okra fritters, also known as okra cakes, offered crisp golden edges and a tender interior that celebrated the summer garden. Fresh okra pods were chopped fine, mixed with cornmeal, onions, and a dash of pepper, then spooned into hot oil until each patty puffed and browned. Sold at fish fries, church picnics, and traveling fairs, these fritters were easy to eat by hand and full of flavor that tied African heritage to southern soil. The okra gave a subtle sweetness and a soft binding that kept the patties moist while the cornmeal crust provided satisfying crunch. Children waited impatiently beside bubbling skillets, hoping for the first fritter to cool enough to taste. Vendors wrapped them in newspaper cones so families could stroll through evening air scented with music and spice. Modern snack foods have replaced these handcrafted treats, but those who remember the sound of oil popping and the taste of garden-fresh okra know the fritters carried more than flavor. They held the joy of gathering and the pride of turning humble crops into a festival of taste. Maypop fruit mash turned the wild passion fruit of the American South into a rare dessert filled with tropical fragrance. Known as maypop for the sound of its hollow fruit when stepped on, this native vine produced aromatic yellow fruits that ripened in late summer. Enslaved foragers gathered the fruit, split the rinds, and scooped the bright pulp into a bowl with a drizzle of molasses or honey when such sweeteners were at hand. The result was a naturally tangy treat that needed no cooking and provided a burst of vitamins. The flavor, a cross between citrus and melon, delighted anyone lucky enough to taste it. Even after emancipation, rural families prized maypops for jellies and pies, and the plant remains a cherished wild edible across the Southeast. Maypop fruit mash preserves a memory of fleeting seasonal abundance and the creativity that transformed wild gifts into moments of celebration, proving that even in the harshest circumstances, people found ways to enjoy the bright, unique flavors offered freely by the natural world. Sauce, also known as head cheese, was a dish made from pig scraps that turned thrift into sustenance. The meat from a pig's head, including tongue and cheeks, was simmered, chopped, and set in a broth with vinegar and spices. Once cooled, it formed a terrine-like dish that could be sliced and served cold, usually with bread. Families valued it because it made use of parts of the hog that others ignored, ensuring that nothing edible was wasted. Sauce carried tangy flavors from the vinegar and a dense texture that was filling and practical. Though not everyone loved it, those who grew up with it remembered it as a staple on the table during lean times. It represented survival and ingenuity, transforming scraps into something lasting. In households where every bite mattered, sauce stood as proof that determination and resourcefulness could make even the most overlooked cuts into meaningful food. Sweet potato biscuits were the soft-spoken stars of every humble table. Made from mashed sweet potatoes, flour, and a touch of lard, they carried the sweetness of the earth and the strength of those who planted it. Each biscuit came out of the oven golden, warm, and smelling like home. Sweet potatoes were a gift crop, tough enough to thrive when others failed, and they carried families through hard seasons. These biscuits stretched what little was available into something that felt like luxury. They were eaten for breakfast with syrup or alongside greens and stew at supper. No matter when, they always brought a comfort that money could not buy. The dough was often mixed by hand, shaped on worn counters, and baked in cast iron. The rhythm of making them passed from mother to daughter like a blessing. Sweet potato biscuits were proof that sweetness could come from struggle, that even the humblest harvest could rise high in the oven and on the heart. They fed not just the body but the spirit, turning hardship into hope with every tender bite. Sorrel hibiscus tea brought a ruby glow to church socials and summer porch gatherings. Its tart floral flavor, steeped from dried hibiscus petals and sweetened with cane sugar, reflected Caribbean influences that African American families carried north and west during migrations. Grandmothers brewed the tea in large enamel pots, sometimes adding a hint of ginger or a squeeze of lime to brighten the taste. Children watched the deep red liquid swirl into pitchers, knowing it signaled a special occasion. Served chilled over cracked ice in simple glasses, sorrel tea cooled guests during humid evenings while hymns and laughter filled the air. The drink offered more than refreshment. It was a quiet connection to ancestors and homelands across the sea. Over time, soda and store-bought beverages replaced the careful steeping of petals and spices, and the vibrant tradition faded in many communities. Those who still make it treasure the deep crimson reminder of resilience and shared history that once colored every celebration. Fish head stew was a dish born out of necessity, yet it carried surprising depth and flavor. Fish heads, often discarded by others, were simmered slowly with onions, potatoes, and rice until they yielded every ounce of richness to the broth. My grandmother insisted the heads made the stew better than fillets, providing body and nourishment that nothing else could. The bones and skin flavored the liquid until it turned hearty and comforting. Potatoes stretched the meal, rice thickened it, and vegetables added substance, turning scraps into a filling supper. The taste was strong, earthy, and unforgettable, reminding everyone that no part of food should go unused. For Black families in the 1960s, fish head stew was a common way to stretch the catch of the day, ensuring nothing went to waste. It became a lesson in thrift and gratitude, proof that survival demanded creativity. Fish head stew was both humble and mighty, sustaining families through lean times with flavor and tradition. Pine needle tea offered a bright and restorative drink when fresh produce was scarce during cold months. Enslaved foragers collected the youngest green needles from longleaf and loblolly pines, rinsed them carefully, and steeped them in hot water until the brew released a light citrus aroma. Rich in vitamin C, this tea helped ward off scurvy and brought a welcome freshness to winter diets heavy with salt-preserved foods. The practice echoed both indigenous traditions and West African herbal knowledge, merging two continents' wisdom into a single sustaining cup. Families continued to brew pine needle tea well after emancipation, and it remains popular among modern herbalists for its gentle flavor and reputed immune-boosting qualities. Its evergreen scent and warm golden color remind us that even in the most barren season, the forest offered nourishment. Pine needle tea illustrates how observing the land and respecting its cycles allowed people to find both medicine and comfort, turning what others overlooked into a sustaining daily ritual that strengthened body and spirit alike. Homemade cane. Syrup drizzle once gave biscuits and pancakes a dark, smoky sweetness unmatched by refined sugar. Families would harvest sugarcane, crush the stalks, and boil the juice in large iron kettles until it thickened into a rich amber syrup. The work was hot and sticky, often stretching from dawn until late night, but the reward was a flavor that defined Southern breakfasts and holiday treats. Children watched the bubbling kettles with wide eyes, waiting for a chance to taste the warm syrup on a fresh biscuit. Neighbors often shared the labor and the finished product, turning the syrup-making into a community event as well as a culinary one. Over time, industrial sweeteners and store-bought syrups replaced the careful craft, and the knowledge of how to coax sweetness from cane faded with older generations. For those who remember, a spoonful of homemade cane syrup is more than a taste. It is a memory of family unity, hard work, and the sweetness that perseverance can bring. Ham bone soup with vegetables was one of those meals where one piece of meat flavored an entire pot. A single ham bone, stripped of most of its meat, simmered for hours with onions, carrots, and potatoes until the broth turned rich and smoky. My grandmother would add beans or greens if she had them, letting the flavors meld into something far more substantial than the ingredients suggested. Families gathered around steaming bowls, dipping bread into the broth and savoring the flavor the bone had left behind. It was frugal cooking at its finest, taking scraps and stretching them into nourishment. The soup fed many mouths, warmed cold nights, and made do with what was available. In the 1960s, when meat was costly, a ham bone could be the centerpiece of dinner, proving that thrift and patience could coax flavor out of nearly anything. Ham bone soup with vegetables carried both practicality and comfort in every ladleful.
Which of these reunion dishes do you remember from your family gatherings? Drop a comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe for more forgotten flavors from our past. Or